once we've posted all the journals into the general ledger, our next step is to total the accounts. So we're going to total general ledger accounts. Now this ought to go pretty quick for most of the accounts. Some of the accounts we have to add up the debits and subtract the credits and so forth. Let's remember which ones are. If it's a debit balance account, we're going to add the debit side and subtract the credit side, right? If it's a credit balance account, we're going to add the credits and subtract the debits, just the opposite, correct? So let's start with the first account in the general ledger. We have the bank account. In this case, we're going to add the debits and subtract the credits, right? Because it's a debit balance account. So we have 3 debits, one for $9,000 representing the original deposit into the account by Barry. We've got a debit for the sales deposits in the gas and grocery part of our business, and a debit for the parts and service sales cash deposit. So we've got 3 debits, but yet we wrote checks from the cash disbursements journal of $20,719, and we wrote checks from the payroll journal for $1,776. So add those 3 debits, subtract the credits, and you should come through with a balance of $21,778. Now I want you to note up here where we wrote that balance. It's in the balance column along with the last entry for the month. Now you might say, well, that's a small thing, but what's going to happen is next month we're going to add the entries for the next month below here. This general ledger card is normally a whole page long. Just to save space, we've just shown you the part you need. But we're going to add the November entries on down below here, and when we get down to the last November entry, we'll total it, and so by the end of the year, we'll have 12 numbers over in this balance column, one for each month. Do you see that? And it'll show us the balance for each month. Okay, so the balance will be $21,778. The next account was accounts receivable. Since the only entry was a debit for $890, that's easy. We'll just carry the balance over here, $890, because it's a debit balance account. Inventory groceries, is it a debit or credit balance account? Debit. It's a debit balance account, so we're going to add our 2 debits of $9,520. We're totaling. We're going to subtract our 1 credit of $9,139.20, and it's going to give us a balance in the inventory of $380.80. Okay? Inventory gasoline, we bought $24,550 worth of gas. We sold $19,900 worth of gas, so the balance is $4,650. Questions on that? So we'll write the balance in. Inventory parts, we bought $1,000 worth of parts. We sold $358 worth of parts. So we've got a balance of $642 in our parts inventory. And so on. Let's just go through the rest of the accounts. I'm not going to give you the balances, but let's identify whether they're debit or credit. And I want you to write a DR or CR up at the top. And if it's a debit, remember to add the debits, subtract the credits. If it's a credit, add the credits and subtract the debits. So furniture and fixtures, is that a debit or credit balance account? Debit. So put a DR up at the top. Accumulated depreciation furniture and fixtures, debit or credit? Credit. So put a CR up at the top of that account. That's one of those contra asset accounts that actually carries a credit sign. The machinery, debit or credit? Debit. Accumulated depreciation machinery? Credit. Then we go to the next one, accounts payable, debit or credit? Credit, so put a CR up there. Sales tax payable, debit or credit? Credit. FICA payable? Federal withholding payable? State withholding payable? Invested capital? Credit. Let's go down to the next page. We've got costs on our left side, sales on our right side. What is the gasoline cost, debit or credit? Debit. Costs are debit. And gasoline sales? Credit. Grocery costs? Debit. Grocery sales? Parts costs? Parts sales? Credit. Okay? Let's go to the expenses. Starting on page 226, rent expense. Debit. Utilities expense? What are all the expenses? Debits, good. Okay, so just put a DR on all the rest of the expenses. Now, I want you to go create the balance for each of those and write it over on the right-hand side there, and then stop. If it zeroes out, put a balance of 0, so it shows that you did it, okay?
With the entries posted, it's time to finalize the general ledger. Total each account in the general ledger, placing the balance in the balance column to the right of the last entry in that account. Once completed, you may wish to compare your answers to those in the answer sheets on pages A.17 through A.22 in the appendix.